Andy has done is, he's done significant type of amount of work and innovative work that you could actually see some of his work. It's sitting downstairs at the Computer History Museum. So I highly recommend that after his speech at lunchtime, you have a little bit of time, run to the museum and go check out some of his work. I'm going to let him start off and have him talk about himself and what he's going to be talking to you.
Great. So I apologize for the late start. I was literally stuck at the exit to the parking lot. It took 15 minutes. I didn't come in this Google traffic jam here. But what I want to talk about today is, and by the way, you can skip the relics at the museum. The important thing is the future. What I want to talk about is the importance of innovation in startups. Mm-hmm. But I got to start with some comments on the world economy, which, unless you haven't been reading the newspapers, it's pretty ugly out there, and arguably it's actually getting worse. So, again, for those of you from Europe, the news is dominated by, passing around sort of the bucket of more donations for bailing all kinds of countries out. There's political gridlock everywhere. It's just every indicator I've been looking at is pointing at recession 2.0, and the hope is it's not depression 2.0. Having said that, this is actually the perfect time to start a company. So, if you go back in history, many, if not most, of the most successful companies have started in recessionary kind of times. And there's good reasons for that. One is, it really focuses people on what needs to get done. It's actually easier to win new customers with a more compelling proposition. But the most important issue is that the innovation doesn't stop because there's a recession going on, right? So the innovation keeps going, and it's the people who take advantage of that innovation in dark times that will look very good in the future. Now, there's some personal history here, which is I came to this country in 1975, which was sort of in the middle of the oil embargo shock. You may not be old enough to remember this, but oil prices kind of tripled overnight, and everybody went into a deep shock. SAN started in 1982, which was actually the depth of the last major recession before the current one. Unemployment was hitting, mid-double digits, and interest rates were at 18% and so on. My most recent company, Arista, started shipping in 2008, targeting the financial sector on Wall Street, just as Wall Street imploded. So that was an interesting experience, but we've come out of this very well. So based on my personal experience, I would recommend to just turn off the television, stop reading the newspapers, and focus on what you want to accomplish. But it is, again, I don't have all the historical data there, but my gut sense is this is actually a good time to start thinking about the future. And going back to innovation, there is this magic fountain of youth here in Silicon Valley called Moore's Law. And for those of you who don't remember this, Dr. Moore, who's co-founder of Intel, back in 1970, maybe it was 71, predicted that the number of transistors per chip will double every other year. This was a very bold prediction when the first Intel 4004 CPU had a total of 2,300 transistors in 1971. Well, believe it or not, as you can see from this curve, the dotted line is this extrapolation. The industry has been on this curve for the last 40 years. And I added some overlay here to amplify how important it is. So in the last 40 years, the number of transistors per chip has increased by a factor of 1 million for, I should add, roughly the same cost. So we had a cost reduction of 1 million to 1 here in the last 40 years, which is pretty magic. But the best news is this isn't stopping. So the technology roadmap going forward, going from 28 nanometer to 22 to 18 to 12, 10, 8, it's not in the bag, but it's pretty predictable. So at least, well, I shouldn't say for the next 20 years, at least for the next 12 years, a factor of 100 is safe. The next 20 years will be another factor of 1,000 if we get there. I'll be retired at that point, but that would be a billion-fold improvement since 1971. And quite frankly, there wasn't anything like this in the history of mankind. I mean, there's nothing that is this ongoing year after year cost performance improvement driven by silicon technology, which underlies so much of everything that's going on here. let me go back to history a little bit here, for those of you who remember this. 1984, IBM PC. In fact, the 80s saw really the first generation of personal computers, as we all know, the first Apple Mac, the Sun workstations of today. In the 90s, we got to laptops, cell phones, portable music players, and now we got iPod, iPhones, and iPads. Now, on the communication side, the ARPANET, the first precursor of modern networking, was invented, believe it or not, in 1965. At least that was the first memo was written. The TCP protocol that we assuming is sort of a fixture out there dates back to 1973. The first 57 computers connected to ARPANET was 1975. And in fact, when I came to this country, it was big news to be able to send an email from Stanford to MIT or Carnegie Mellon. Now, the ARPANET at the time actually wasn't running TCP. That switchover happened in 1983, and it was as recently as 1988 when the internet was still considered an educational, non-commercial venture, where it finally got opened up to the commercial interests. On the networking side, Ethernet was invented almost 40 years ago, 35 years ago at this point. 10 megabit Ethernet is old, 30 years, you name it. So there's been steady progression of standards, same in fiber communication, speed of lasers, etc. But the point of these slides is that it does take a couple of years from idea, prototype, and then another couple of years into the lab, early adoption, wide-scale adoption. So historically, these kind of adoption cycles, if you will, have ranged from 10, if not 20 years. It's happening a little faster in the age of the web. So if you look back at the history of web browsers, first web browser, 1990, invented by Tim Berners-Lee at CERN. I guess the first, that was on the next machine. The first one that ran on a Unix system at the time was 1991. The first graphics, 1992. Mark Andreessen, released the first Mosaic thing in 1983. 1994, Netscape got started. 1995, Netscape went public. So it did go a little faster back then. And to keep this in mind, right, there was a plethora of web browser solutions in the 90s. Again, I didn't remember all these names here, but we had Amiga and NetComplete and Charlotte and you name it kind of browsers. Obviously, none of this matters anymore because the browser is a commodity, free open source, or bundled with your favorite operating system. But that was the history of web browsers, which was a big deal, by the way, in 1985. Netscape went public with this one idea and had a market cap of millions of dollars at the time. But of course, what Netscape missed was the important thing was not the browser, but to find stuff on the web. And let's go back to 1985. So this was the year of Yahoo. So Yahoo, straight out of Stanford, had this splendid idea of, let's hire a whole bunch of people and edit the internet, edit the content, just like a newspaper, and have, columns for sports and gardening and whatnot, and then pick the best websites and put them into these columns. Well, that kind of worked in 1985, but it didn't solve the problem of people trying to find other stuff. There was Alta Vista out there, I'm not sure some of you remember that, but that was the first search engine I sort of used. And it actually kind of worked in 1985, but starting in like 1986, it kind of stopped working because people figured out that all that Alta Vista was doing is was counting the keywords in the page. So people basically added dark pages, which had like a whole dictionary at the end of each thing they wanted to get to the top. So whatever you're looking for, all the pages were trying to rise. So the Alta Vista didn't survive, the early attempts at spamming the system. And obviously today is another relic in the history book. But believe it or not, there was at least 20 search engines in the 90s. The W3 catalog, Lycos, Infoseek, Dogpile, Northern Light, I guess Yandex is still around, SG is still around. But the one that we think of today as the primary example of search, which is Google, was actually not the first one or even one of the early ones. It was actually the last search engine that got started in 1998. And the homepage today still looks almost the same as back then. Of course, now they have the little Google Plus thing. But the early business plan, for those of you who may not remember this, was just based on one thesis, which is that search is actually very important. And for whatever reason, people at that time hadn't actually recognized this. In fact, the popular belief was it's impossible to do search automatically because you needed artificial intelligence to figure out what the semantics of all these things were, and so on. So the notion that one can use relevant links, which is what matters is not how many web pages you publish, but how many people point to you, just like in the scientific literature. It doesn't matter how many papers you read, but how many people cite your paper. That basic idea has served Google extremely well, in combination, of course, with a business model which was based on relevant ads. And they believe that that would be a very effective tool to get revenue. So the truth is, the only thing cheaper than relevant ads is email and email spamming, as you well know. But short of that, relevant ads wins hands down on any measure of effectiveness of advertising. And obviously this was a great contributor to Google and the world as we know it. But let me mention one more thing about Google, which is Google actually didn't really take off until the last .com implosion recession hit in 2001. So if you look at their filed S1s, Google was a tiny company until the recession hit. And this is sort of back to the original topic, which is why is this a good time to start a company? So the reason Google actually took off in 2001, quite frankly, was this is the first time people realized they're wasting their money on banner ads at Yahoo. So before, the predominant advertising model on the web was banner ads, and remember all the banner ads that you never clicked on? People spent millions, maybe billions of dollars on these banner ads that arguably were very effective until they realized that sponsored links, the paid-for-click kind of thing, is a much better business model for the advertiser. And that realization happened in 2001 when people are looking at their budgets and trying to figure out where they should spend money. So again, recessions can be good for your business. Oh, and then social websites. You may think social websiting is a very recent invention. Well, the first social website arguably was 1994-95 classmates.com, which is still around. There was 6 Degrees and Friendster, which was started with a lot of venture capital, MySpace, and I'm sure there's many more. But the one that actually matters the most is the one that started most recently in 2004, which is Facebook, which is now up at 800 million users and counting. So the lessons to learn from these few examples here is that the time from invention or recognizing how to do something to adoption can be very short on the web. And you actually do not have to be the first company out there with a certain idea. What really matters is to solve the right problem. And this is what has separated the men from the boys, so to speak. And independent of that, having a model where there's ongoing innovation and scaling and coming up with new ideas is obviously equally important. So next topic, which is how does one accelerate innovation? And let me start with some observations from big companies that we all may know, because the arguably big companies already out there, they are the competition in most cases. So this is sort of a trick question. Does anybody in the room know which large company spends the least amount of money on R&D? Any guesses? I'll save you the guess. It's Apple Computers. So on a percentage of revenue, Apple spends less on R&D than Dell or HP or certainly IBM, until you name it. And it's actually getting more extreme because Apple keeps growing more quickly than the other people. But the simple answer for this, and the simple explanation, is that Apple's product line is surprisingly simple. It fits on one slide or on their homepage, and it's basically, Apple Macs and iPads and iPhones and tablets and a little bit of software. Now, advice from Steve Jobs has been and continues to be that the hardest thing in life is to say no. So here's a big company that's enormously successful, that has money piling up more than any company in history, and they spend their time thinking about what they should not be doing. Because, as they have learned, and as other people have learned, is what you not do is as important as what you do. And there has been other research that corroborates this. So Booth Allen Hamilton, which is a research outfit, concluded there's actually no correlation between R&D spending as a percentage of revenue and the success a company has in the market. Okay, it has literally nothing to do. What matters is what you actually accomplish. The process, the focus, not the pocketbook. Now, people, of course, then said, how do we come up with better ideas? Let's do customer service, focus groups, ask people on the street. And again, the company that's not doing any of this is Apple. So this is a statement from Jonathan Ive, who's the VP of product design. He actually literally said that they don't even talk to people about what they're working on next. They don't use focus groups. They just look at ourselves for ideas. And this is from the company who's arguably the most innovative on the planet on the large scale. Now, what we can learn from this is that the important thing is to actually take ownership of innovation, right? Innovation doesn't happen in the sort of nirvana out there in the cloud. It has to happen in a focused effort. And Apple certainly has done that. And the corollary of this is to say no to everything else. And again, this does come down to how much money one has and how much one wants to spend. But the only spending that makes any difference is the one that has a payoff in the future. Now, most other large companies have much more complex business models. They have thousands of products. They can figure out what to continue investing in and what to get out of. So not everybody can be Apple, but we can certainly learn from that. There's been more research being done where these ideas actually come from, and in most companies, and this includes large, medium, and small, most of the ideas, as you would expect, come from your own employees and or essentially customers. So everything else is almost like in the noise, including the R&D department. So good ideas come from the market, from trying to solve the problem, from your own people, but not really from consultants or other places. And obviously what matters is execution. And here the problem is this sort of funnel, right, where when you do the brainstorming stage, it's easy to do hundreds of ideas. Then the reality is that you only have budget to look into a couple of these, and in the end maybe one of them really should get to market. So the funnel or the brainstorming sort of breadth search space is the largest up front. And the one mistake a lot of companies may do is that they don't spend enough time on the upfront stage. What happens is the spending, which is the dollars being spent on prototypes and engineering and development, is all tilted to the tail end of the product development cycle, which is just as the product is coming out the door, whereas the phase one, which basically takes one smart guy sitting by himself in a cubicle or just dreaming about what should do next, has very little spending visibility to the top management. And arguably, people do not spend enough time on thinking about what they should be doing or what choices they really have, and they spend too much time and too much money on the tail end of these development cycles. One needs to pay more attention. And then there's this other thing known as ROI, standing for Return on Investment. And people have written books about this. There's spreadsheets and formulas. There's this one I copied from the web, and people can analyze anything to depth. Now, I'm convinced Apple is not doing this, by the way, but this is what happens in traditional companies where you're trying to make the right decision and the finance people sign off on the final conclusion. It's probably not the best way to innovate because you basically look at current reality and not look at what's actually possible or how one could focus better. But the main thing is the ROI doesn't tell you what the innovation is. So the innovation is what drives revenue, what drives products, what drives new ideas. And without innovation, well, you cannot really easily win in the market. Okay, now back to innovation here. There's this buzzword known as the horizon effect. And I first heard about this in school in the artificial intelligence class when the topic was chess playing computers, and they could only look 3 moves ahead. So if they couldn't see the 4th move that was the winning move, they would miss the 3 moves that would lead to the win, right? And unfortunately, this is equally true for people. Most people, including myself, you wouldn't start something that you can't see the final outcome. This is something that's beyond the horizon, because if you don't know how to get there, what's the point of getting going? And the problem with this is, we only basically see the easy things where we see a way to get there. And it is worth challenging ourselves, to see one step further than the obvious. You can compare this to the world before Christopher Columbus, where the Earth was flat, and people thought the ocean was the end of that plate, until somebody thought about that couldn't be happening because where does all the water go? So there's other horizons, like time horizons, where especially for public companies, there's an incredible pressure to bring in the numbers every quarter and keep up to the budgets and so on. Arguably, this may be good for the shareholders. It's not the best for innovation. In most public companies, people have a hard time to think beyond the next 12 months, maybe the next 18 months. And the reason is, there's a lot of stuff happening in the next 12 months. As a startup, you actually have the privilege of not having this burden, and you can think one step ahead. In fact, it's most likely going to take you more than 12 months or 18 months to get to market. So you can actually adopt a horizon that's not the focus of most public companies, and not a place where these companies spend a lot of money on. And there's other kind of horizons and people collaborate and so on and so on. And then finally, resources, right? I mean, obviously you need the resources, the money, the cash, the engineers to complete a project. There's a big difference in efficiency, obviously, how much it takes, but there's no question that without resources we won't get here. In an established business, in a public company, people hesitate when they need to commit a bunch of resources to a project that's perceived as risky. In a startup company, that's your only shot, right? So again, most public companies spend the vast percentage of their R&D spending on enhancing current products, fixing bugs, the quality department. Maybe it's, my best guess is more than 90% of what you see as the R&D budgets on most companies, not counting Apple necessarily, but sort of traditional companies, is spent on perfecting the current product, not inventing a new generation of products. And as a result, most funding is applied to these safe bets and not to more risky bets in the future. The bottom line is, as a startup, one has the opportunity to skip ahead or to get ahead by a product cycle over what most large established businesses are doing. And even a large company, people should be placing more risky bets, but they really are not. Most research groups at large companies have been decimated in recent years or just abandoned because they didn't produce an immediate ROI, and with few exceptions. So let's also talk about what makes ideas succeed and fail. And believe it or not, the reason that really good new ideas fail are very few. I could only come up with 5 things on my list here. The first one is that you're too early to market. Believe it or not, that can actually happen. If you're too early, there's no customers, they won't buy the product, that's too bad. But the reverse of that is you're too late to market. That's arguably worse because then all you can do is discount it more or give it away, or you just don't get the traction that the guy had that came in earlier. So the key there, of course, is that the timing, when the idea will actually be received by customers, has to be right. Now, another reason new ideas fail is that too hard to use. So when the product is too complicated and too hard to explain, and the value proposition is obvious, it's a tough sale. The worst one is probably if the idea wasn't relevant. So then it wasn't a good idea to begin with. Forget it. And the final one, if it's just too expensive and people can't sort of justify it. But again, these are roughly the 5 reasons why ideas don't make it. But if you have good timing, if it's a relevant idea, it's priced correctly, it usually succeeds. Now, the alternative, of course, is to not do anything, and that's why that's not the reason we're here. Now, let me use some examples of being different, and again, let's go back to some well-known public company. So here's Apple, that historically was known for the Macintosh computer. I think it was exactly 10 years ago. 10 years ago we launched the iPod. So until 10 years ago, we thought of Apple as perhaps the pioneer in the personal computer market, but fallen down in market share and getting a little revival with Steve Jobs coming back in 1997. Well, since then, all the growth of Apple had to do not with the Macintosh as much, but with the new categories that entered: the music, the iPad, the iPhone, and delivering content on these things. So I think, as far as I can tell, on an insider there, they basically completely focused on this, what I would call the digital consumer opportunity. Now, nobody else did this, right? So, HP could have done it, IBM could have done it, Dell could have done it, but they didn't really do it. They just kept selling the same old personal computer. And Apple's additional bonus here was they simplified the experience so much that you no longer need a manual to use it. I was actually surprised. I bought an iPad recently, and I was looking for the manual, and it was this 2x2-inch piece of paper that says the on-off button is here and the mute button is up there. That was the whole manual. So, and on top of that, the products look good, and they basically did a very, very good job combining hardware innovation, software innovation, and the web in a seamless experience for the consumer. And at this point, and maybe they didn't invent all this stuff, but they brought it together in a way that was truly compelling. And at this point, the world expects them to invent the next big thing, whatever that may be, right? So, if you look at this from a financial standpoint, they basically had no product failure in 10 years. What other company could ever say that? But it all is based on this deeply ingrained mission that, their mission is to innovate, and their mission is to succeed and lead the world into this digital future. And the net result is they're the most valuable, company on the planet at this point. Google started off with a search engine, that was easy enough. In the meanwhile, we got, maps and news and Earth and YouTube and Android, very importantly, Chrome, Nexus phones, etc. Their attitude or approach is somewhat different than Apple, which is they love to hire people right out of school. So the ideal candidate at Google is someone who just graduated, because they're not that confused how to invent new things. And their corporate strategy is to give people one day off a week to think about other stuff. So they have dedicated, certainly, dedicated the time for that. And apparently a lot of the innovations they have delivered came out of this, free time. At least that's what they're saying. But what Google is doing is they're setting themselves very, very aggressive goals, in particular on scalability. So in the Google world, if it doesn't work for hundreds of millions of users, just don't even think about the idea. And they have been able to deliver those kind of scalable ideas to the market, arguably faster than anybody else, which is why I think they have kept their market share and so on. So they also believe they can solve the impossible from a scaling perspective, and that the world revolves around innovation and information that they will deliver the access to. They ended up with the third highest market cap in the IT industry, but I think arguably they have been an innovation engine over all these years. Completely different company, Amazon. So here's a company that started at the world's biggest bookstore. Remember this, 1995 or 96, ordering a book on Amazon. And in the meanwhile, they delivered, of course, anything you could order online. But surprisingly, they also became the world's largest cloud computing vendor. Meaning, here's a company going from books to cloud computing. And they just launched their $199 version of an iPad, known as the Kindle Fire yesterday. So arguably that would do even better. So this is a company that has, I think, surprised anybody in terms of branching out and not failing in their new endeavors. And again, the company is built around a pioneer kind of culture where, according to Jeff Bezos, they love to hire people who like a high rate of change. And they like to have a whole bunch of ideas sort of percolating and see what actually works. And they like to try a lot of ideas at a time. So they have been fairly modest in terms of how they marketed this, but I think Amazon has been overachieving on an innovation scale, certainly compared to what people have expected. Now, last example is Facebook, and again, this was not the earliest social website, but one of the last ones. And what can we learn from Facebook? Well, the number one thing to learn is don't start a company at Harvard, but move to Palo Alto. Number two, don't start a company without proper legal paperwork. And the last one, don't go public until you have to. But more seriously, what Facebook has done is, again, they focus on the problem in terms of how to really scale it to these hundreds of millions of users they have. And arguably, they've been the only social website that succeeded at this problem. So, if you're a database expert or Hadoop cluster expert, you have lots of job openings at Facebook, but they're the one who solved the problem of how to deliver this at a very large scale. Many of the other companies who try to be in this space, thought of this as a marketing problem, or pay for a whole bunch of ads on Google to get people interested in the site, and they join perhaps, but it actually didn't deliver the user experience that people were looking for. And I think this was true in MySpace and the other places that essentially failed. Now, the final conclusion from Facebook is, hire people right out of school and treat them well. So there's kind of a theme here. Anyway, bottom line is, all what we think of are the most successful companies today started and are continuing, have a very, very big focus on innovation. They would not be at where they are today if they'd stuck, selling books on the web or not scaling their operations, etc. And I just don't know how to overemphasize that in a startup, that this is all you got, right? What you have is an idea that will hopefully work out, but an idea that's better than what's out there, that solves the problem in a way that hasn't been solved before, that can deliver a service or some other product in a better way to market, and that really solves a problem that hasn't been solved yet. So this is the essence, of course, of startups. And you know, again, the business plan competitions, everything is fine, but then what matters is to translate this really good idea into a product that comes to market. And again, as I said at the very beginning, you know, don't let the economy slow you down. As long as you have some amount of money in the bank, you know, you can actually go at a fairly good pace. Now, let's see, how much more time do I have? Do you have another 5-10 minutes? Okay. So, just areas of, you know, innovation in the IT space, which is sort of my sort of focus. Big data is a really big deal these days. You know, people used to assume that you need an Oracle extra data cluster to analyze your data. Well, with Hadoop and innovating on top of Hadoop, there's a lot of stuff that can be done. The cloud at large, meaning you don't have to build your own server room anymore. You don't have to buy all the servers. You can save the money for the employees. You don't have to spend on capital, and you can rent as many as you need at Amazon for bargain basement kind of rates. Virtualization is still a hot topic. Obviously, you know, VMware has done really well there, but this is not ending now. And there's ongoing innovation on the virtualization side. Mobile devices is probably not the best area for a startup at the device level, but there's incredible innovation on top of these devices, services that can be delivered, applications, etc. And energy efficiency is, you know, is still a topic. Some of the green energy plans haven't worked out as well as the venture capital people had hoped. But it's an important topic, and you know, it kind of, if it really works, it does sell itself. But coming back to the innovation sort of summary, and I have a few more slides after that, is, you know, one really has the focus in a startup company is the single most important thing. The focus on solving the right problem that ultimately has success in the market. And you know, I would just put the blindness on everything else, both what's happening in the rest of the world and what other people are doing, because what really matters is that you succeed at the goal, you know, you're setting out for yourself. So a few more slides on my most recent company called Arista Networks, which I've been with since 2008. So what we do is we're building, you know, network switches, 10 gigabit and above, small, medium, large, etc. A lot of these switches are used in cloud computing, of all things. So we have shipped these things to the world's largest cloud computing sites, and they power, you know, 10,000 of servers in clusters. But the problem for us, you know, as a startup company is, how do we compete in a market as a startup that's completely dominated by this other company called Cisco, which happens to have 70% market share and, you know, 495 out of the Fortune 500 as customers. And this is a real problem, because if there's a company out there that's so well established, you know, you really have to attack the market in a way that's so different. So this is, by the way, the market share that we've been looking at when we, you know, got going. The answer, of course, is we had to find a better solution to the problem. And the number one problem we identified really a lot was software stability. So even though you think of the network as a stable thing, the truth is there's still way too many outages for the cloud in particular, where there's, you know, these things run 24/7, there's no maintenance windows, they can never actually break, because otherwise all the people connected to these cloud servers wouldn't be connected anymore. So the software running on these switches is millions of lines of code, and arguably there's always some bugs that are left in there. And if you trip one of these bugs, the thing can literally crash. So what we did is we invented a software architecture that's so modular that it basically uses a stateless process around some in-memory database, but it has the attribute that it's essentially self-healing. We can replace each of the running pieces while the system is running, or restart them if they faulted, without bringing on the switch operation. And this isn't available from any other vendor out there, so this has been a big differentiation for us. We are running on standard Linux to improve the stability of the kernel. And the final thing is we decided we didn't need to develop our own chips. So historically people spend a lot of money to do their own switch silicon. The virtual silicon is just as good these days, and it enabled us to have a much more competitive business model. So bottom line, yeah, let me just stop here. The bottom line is, you know, even in a world where it's dominated by a very powerful and a very, you know, famous company, one can still enter the market if you have a better solution to the problem. But there has to be something that you can differentiate with, otherwise this would be a difficult road. So let me stop here, and maybe we have time for a couple of questions.
We'll take maybe 2 questions. Do you want to stand up?
No mic?
Do we have a
Speak
mic
boldly.
up there?
Hi Andy, my name is Jim Cascade. Fabulous messages in your presentation, thank you. So there are a number of things that I agreed with. Most of the things you said, compressed time to market, this is the best time to start a company, etc. But there was one comment you made that I struggled with, and I thought maybe you could elaborate on, and that had to do with the fact that you inferred successful companies like Apple were able to achieve their innovation by relying first on their employees, second on their partners, and then their customers. And I struggle with that a little bit because, let me just present it in terms of a question to you. Didn't those companies, all these successful companies, hire the type of people that truly understood or understand the business problems that they're addressing? And doesn't it come down to the team that you build? Maybe you could elaborate a little bit about team in terms of one of those points in your failure list, like the number 6 item in terms of execution, etc.
Yeah. So I'm now on my fifth startup. So I've seen this over the years, and the one company I started, which actually became the largest one, was SANY, which obviously in the end wasn't successful. It sold out to Oracle 2 years ago. What happens is when you get to very large companies, they develop a life on their own. Right? You have suddenly a whole bunch of business units or groups that all think they're doing something useful, but they're actually not as focused anymore on the overall progress of the company. And the same thing, by the way, arguably happened at Citi, which is otherwise a very successful company, but it has 65,000 people, and you just don't get the most forward-looking, brightest people as part of the 65,000. Or even if you have a couple of them, they can't sort of move the super tanker ship around to point in the right direction. And perhaps the really smart people left these big companies a long time ago because they identified some problem in the market they wanted to solve. So one incredible advantage startups have is that you can recruit the best, brightest people that really want to solve an important problem and take very strong ownership of this particular thing they want to go after, which is unlike, this just doesn't happen in big companies. In a big company, they're saying, let's invent the next 2.0 of anything. Is really, really hard. Most companies don't survive it. The one I showed as examples are the best of the breed, right? If you go down the list, I don't know, Hewlett Packard, Dell, they keep making the same stuff year after year, and they have leading market share in PCs and servers and so on. But there just hasn't been any innovation in this space. And maybe it's a commodity, maybe there's no more innovation. But they didn't move beyond a new product category, and maybe there isn't more for them. Whereas in the startup, you can go from 0 to millions of dollars or tens of millions or $100 million with the right idea, focus on the opportunity. Whereas the big company, for them another $10 or $100 million idea it's not big enough to move the needle on their annual statements, so they actually won't do it. So one way big companies kill innovation is by saying, if it's not a multi-$100 million thing, it doesn't work for them because they're too big. Whereas in a startup, getting to $100 million revenue is making it happen. So there is a real opportunity to be under the radar screen of these big companies and get to a point where, suddenly they want to buy you because if they just had the technology, they could do $100 million already, but they didn't think of that internally, right? So innovation truly happens mostly, I shouldn't say mostly, in many places outside of these large entities. So having said that, right now to start another company to compete with Apple building a better iPad is probably not the best idea because they've done such a good job at that it's impossible even for Samsung or Sony to be really successful at that. So one has to be realistic of how strong a competitor is and what the barriers are they would prevent you from entering the market. And again, one advantage startups have is that you can focus on a particular domain where your expertise tells you what the real opportunity is in sort of this micro analysis of market segments of we're going to do exactly this and all that. So for example, my most recent company, Arista, before we started the company, I should say, we actually thought about what problem could we solve in the entire IT space that makes any difference, where we could have identified a way to get to market and be successful. And we picked data center networking for the simple reason that there wasn't enough technology changes coming and there wasn't enough sort of unsolved scalability problems that we thought we had an opportunity. That we didn't do wiring closet switches or routers or wireless or other parts of the networking space which are well covered by other companies that are all very successful, because each of this will be a different engineering focus. So even though it's all networking, even that space you have to pick like the one category or the one type of product that you can really deliver, that makes a difference. So micro market analysis, is key to understand where you really have a way to insert yourself and get traction with customers. And once you have traction, of course, you can then branch out. But the first product kind of has to work. Most people don't get a second lease on life. It depends how much money there's in the bank, but if you and this is, by the way, one thing I should mention with getting VC funding. It's great to raise a whole bunch of money from a venture capitalist and have it in the bank, but you also essentially enter into a contract, with the VC to deliver on your plan. Now, if then the plan wasn't kind of the right plan and you want to change it, it's going to be a very gut-wrenching discussion about, how do we get here and why did we not think of this in the first place. So before you raise a lot of money, figure out the plan that you're really going to do, because it may not work out too well if you want to change it later. And a lot of companies, kept going on a plan that at some point was then clear it wasn't going to work, but they felt they had this sort of agreement with the VCs that that's what they're going to do. So in the end, what matters is, of course, being successful, not what the original agreement was. A long answer to a short question, but one other last question, or?
Is there one more question, and then we have to move on? Any more questions?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next panelist. It's going to discuss how to partner with all these large corporations that Andy spoke about. I just wanted to let you know that if you have access to the internet and you want to tweet, we do have a hashtag set up. On Twitter, it's number SVConnect, right? SVConnect. So go ahead and tweet about this. We're going to get started. I'd like to introduce Vivian Lee. She's actually our Director of Marketing for CCIC, but she has an extensive history at corporate. She just came out of HP, so she'll tell you a little bit more about herself and introduce herself and the panelists today. Thank you, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Let me give you a little bit of introduction about myself. Prior to working with Sarah at CCICE, I came from HP, from the Corporate Ventures team, as well as Corporate Strategy. I worked on different operational improvement projects for the CEO, as well as generated a pipeline of cloud and analytics company to help HP grow. This morning, we're fortunate to have 5 executives here from a range of software and hardware companies to talk to us about partnership with their companies. The topics that we're going to cover today include programs that they have, their engagement process, what kind of technology they're interested in, and potential venture investment funds. We're going to have time for you to ask questions at the very end, so please save your questions until then. Without further ado, I'd like to have the panelists introduce themselves.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Denzel Samuels, and I head up all the global channels and partnerships and solutions for Salesforce.com, headquartered out of San Francisco. I've been with the company for about 6 months now. Prior to that, I used to head up global channels for Siemens. So going from an engineering-centric German company in Munich to innovative company out of San Francisco, very different cultures, but the challenges that we face in channels are the same. So happy to be here, and I hope we can address a lot of your questions. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bernard Sled. I'm the Managing Director of Breakthrough Venture Partners. Breakthrough Venture Partners specializes in monetizing innovation, so working with large corporations, mentoring a few startups, and also buying intellectual property, IT patents. I was most recently at HP, where I was the head of the startup ecosystem programs, so spearheaded HP's $100 million commitment to South America, which was announced a few months ago, and also led the delegation to the White House in January. Prior to that, I've been in various roles at large corporations like Intel, engaging with the ecosystem, in corporate venture capital roles at HP and Alpha Aquitaine, French energy and pharmaceutical company at the time. And I've also worked at startups as a founder, as a CEO, and also in business development roles interacting with large corporations. So I have some sense of the dynamics and the cycles involved in this equation.
Hi, good morning. I'm Winston Cho from Intel. I manage the ecosystem development for our networks and tablets group. So we look for technologies from silicon to services, which we can partner with, to license, invest in, or acquire. Prior to Intel, I ran a business networking software startup. And then prior to that, I had 10 years in doing business development in various mobile roles, from Nokia to HP to Sun Microsystems.
Too loud. Good morning. My name is Wendy. My Chinese name is Wei. It's easier to pronounce because when I'm on the phone call, people say we did a good job. It's always me, not W-E. Okay. So I work for Oracle. I'm with the Fusion development, Fusion actually application side, responsible for the globalization and also early customer adoption programs and also overall program management for Fusion. And prior to that, I worked for acquired division in Oracle. It's a utility GPU. It was a kind of startup, and there I was responsible for, field-facing roles and also overall shared services. And also in the past, I worked for SAP, and where I was involved in post-merger integration, the partner and alliance programs, just to make sure the acquired companies are on board and become part of the big company, and to get certified and just get more revenue into the new product roadmap. That's about it. Hopefully we'll have a nice discussion this morning.
Good morning. Good. My name is Linda Ting. I'm the Director of Business Development for the Microsoft Emerging Business Team based here in Mountain View, just across the street. Our team has a very simple charter. We focus specifically on startups. We start a developer in two ways. We help them or enable them accelerate the adoption of key platforms and technologies, as well as enable them as a go-to-market partner.
Thank you. Linda, let's start with you. Since you're from Microsoft, and we all know that there are a lot of different programs like the SCAN or even the Windows Mobile 7.5 that I just read about this morning. There are many different programs involving different types of startups. Can you tell us a little bit about the programs that are available that startups can get engaged with?
Sure, that's actually a great question for our team. We sort of spearheaded the startup efforts across Microsoft as a company. We have 300,000, hundreds of thousands plus of partners, generating 90+% of the revenue for the company. Startups were generally overlooked as a distinct group to partner with both on the technology side and the market side. So that being said, our team worked pretty hard at developing a thesis and getting a significant budget approval for a program called BizSpark. And BizSpark is, if you think about scale and a very breadth program, today it's normalizing in about 70,000 developers who've signed up in over 100 countries around the world. And what the program offers at no charge is full access to all of the production developer licenses for the majority of our servers and our tools. So it would be Windows, SQL Server, you can develop for phone, you name it, at no charge. And so you just have to meet some basic criteria. You have to be less than 3 years old, generating less than $1 million in revenue, and a privately held software company. And that program has done incredibly well. We've just started to see some graduation of the companies. It's 3 years old, so it's a 3-year life cycle. And so that's one end of the spectrum. And then at the very, so when you think of a pyramid, top of the pyramid, from a depth engagement perspective, there's a program that I work with, and that's called the BizSpark 1, and it's a select program. It's about 100 startups. There's 7 people like me that go out and scour the market to try to identify the most promising and high potential startups who are using Microsoft technologies and doing interesting things with our stuff. And so we help accelerate them through certain funds and certain resources and support and engineering and technical resources to ramp up on our platforms, and then we also help them go to market through various things, from channels to PR to marketing to launch events. And mobile is actually a very topical subject. We run 11 mobile acceleration weeks. So it's, think of dev camp for about a week. You're provided offshore development resources, you're provided technical readiness through deep access to engineering and support, and the whole goal of that is to have some people working prototype on the latest Windows phone system. So we run those all over the world today.
Thank you, Linda. Want to talk about Intel's program, Winston?
Yeah, the one that I can talk about is the Intel App Up Developer Program. So that was one that was set up recently to really drive the development of apps on top of Atom-based chipsets for netbooks and tablets. In the last couple of years, Intel has shipped over 100 million netbooks in the market, and we can expect a big ramp for that for the tablets that we're doing as well. So what the App Up program is, it provides a marketplace which provides you a channel to distribute your apps, as well as SDKs and support.
Is programs available for global startups as well?
Yeah, because our netbooks are, in fact, the largest markets for the netbooks are in Asia right now, in emerging countries. So appup.com is a place that you can go and take a look at how you can get involved in the programs. It's free to join. And yes, they're available for any developer.
Sure. So I'm not representing any corporation today, so I'll give you maybe a balanced view on this topic. I think corporations do these programs for a specific purpose, and you have to look at what are the odds that, or what you can get out of those programs. So in the case of Microsoft, I think Linda and Bismarck do a terrific job of helping startups. I think it's Bismarck is the gold standard of corporate programs as far as enabling startups. But from your perspective, you have to define what do you get out of these programs. What does a particular corporation do in your business development roadmap, your product roadmap, and your technology roadmap. And so if you're going to be using Microsoft technology, you should connect with Microsoft. If you're going to be using other technology, then why connect with a given vendor? So whether it be HP, IBM, and so forth. And so you have to really map what your objectives are to what these corporations' objectives are, and figure out the type of engagement. So Linda works in Bismarck. If you're a very hot startup, you're going to get special care from people like Linda at Microsoft. If you join a program that's more a general technology access platform, you're going to get technology access. You might not get the path to market or the top business development agreement that maybe you're coveting. So be mindful of what these programs are designed to do and designed to accomplish, and use them for what they're there for. And I think I worked in Intel, so I'm aware of Intel's quality as well. I unfortunately don't know Oracle as well. But, these are high quality companies, and what the types of programs they offer are high quality, but they're high quality for the purposes that they're made that they're designed to serve. And so do these objectives serve your purposes is how you filter, if you will, between all these available options.
Thank you. So at Salesforce, we have programs that are divided into two distinct categories. One category is software development for independent software developers. The second is services. Right. So I head up the world of services. Our next panel speaker that's on after the break, Ron Huddleston, heads up everything that goes on in our platform side. So how many of you have developed on the Force.com platform? On the back, okay. So we have a platform that really is very agnostic. It's Heroku. We have, it's Ruby on Rails development, however we've extended it to Java. We have rapid development methodologies. We also have agile methodologies. Someone can start on click-based development versus code-based development and get an app up and running within weeks versus months or years. They can take that app, which could be a point solution, right the way through from development to testing to actually in production on our Force.com platform in weeks. They can sign a reseller agreement and be out in the market selling. As a result of that, in 18 months, we've got to 1 million apps that are out there. It's very much, we have an app exchange, very much like Apple's App Store. So any potential customer of Salesforce can get out, look at what's on App Exchange, pick what they need for them, and implement it. So it's a very successful program. We onboard thousands of ISVs every year. On the and Ron can tell you more about that when he's on in the next panel and how to be onboarded. But Ron Huddleston is the guy to contact if you're an independent software vendor and you want access onto our App Exchange. On the consulting side, we deal with big partners such as the Capgeminis, the Deloittes, the Accentures, IBMs of this world, right down to the little guys, right? And so that world falls under me. What we have for startup companies who are looking to become Salesforce, people that implement Salesforce products, and the products range not just from Salesforce Automation, but they go all the way through from Salesforce Automation to Database.com, to Jigsaw, to Heroku, to Radiant 6, to social media and monitoring. In essence, products that change the world in terms of companies embracing social enterprise. If you want to consult in that world, you can approach me directly. I'll put you in touch with any one of our team that does net new services startups for us. We have a significant multi-million-dollar fund to help startups get started with us. So if that's something of interest to you, we look at, we've got certain things we look for, and we can go over that criteria with you. We also point you in directions in terms of the regions we want you to be based in, where we have the gap, and we also ask you to drive certifications for your consultants. Okay, but we have, just to give you, we've had 2 or 3 in just the last quarter who have gone from 0 to fairly significant revenues because the methodologies we've employed and just the sheer volume of business we're driving. We're growing 57% a year, and in the last quarter alone we signed up 7,000 customers. Right, so we have to find consulting companies to go and implement our solutions at those customers. And you know, for those of you that deal with us, you probably know we're the 4th fastest growing company in the country right now.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about when you were referring to the different regions for consulting services? Is it globally or is it?
It is globally.
What are you looking for?
We are
so
looking,
the criteria.
Yeah, we are looking for consulting companies globally, services companies globally. We obviously we have countries that are very core to us that are driving the bulk of our revenue. The United States is one of those countries. We have a significant amount of revenue here in the US, but our fastest growing region, frankly, is Europe, Middle East, and Africa, where the Kool-Aid that we've had here for the last 10 years is now spread to Europe, and we're starting to see a demand in Europe that we've never seen before. Another area that's growing very quickly for us is Asia Pacific, and Asia Pacific is very much, for those of you that have dealt in that region, it's very much an indirect region. It's a region that specializes with doing most business through third parties versus direct sales. And so consulting companies for us, they're very important, especially in the fastest growing areas.